Brandon up to
Hold it on.
the stage now. Stage. Pulpit.
I'm from a church family, it's a stage. The best stage. Yeah, my name's Stephen. I'm apologizing for my informal dress. When I first came to Fort Bragg, I was wearing less. I was in my birthday suit on March 6, 1963. I was born here. So this is a step up. I did ride about 800 miles to get here. This is like the 5th time I've ridden the coast. It's just this thing I do. It's my quest. And this time, miraculously, the date of my passing through Fort Bragg was the 13th and 14th. So this just happened to be here. My father and mother can't travel anymore. My father's health is challenged, but I have a letter from him, and I just saw this in the centennial. I want to read a little bit about my dad. Reverend Liff-Anderson served from 61 to 64. Pastor when the church celebrated the 75th anniversary. There was an historical play presented at that time, written and directed by the late Hazel Thurman. Highlights of the 2-day event was a cantata, The Letters of John, written and directed by Jean Anderson, my mom, who was an accomplished pianist. Reverend Anderson was very active in calling, especially to the shut-ins. The School of Missions was an important part of his ministry, perhaps because some of his family were missionaries. My dad's mother and father were serving in China when my father was born, in Shanghai. Jean taught piano to many young people and held recitals in the sanctuary. The junior choir, in their blue robes, began about this time. Reverend and Mrs. Anderson, with their family, were a tremendous asset to our church and community. Just to let you know what we did after we left, turned 64, my father went to divinity school in Boston, so we moved way across the country. I was 1. I don't remember a lot of it. But they had 2 churches in New Hampshire, North Charleston and Salem, and they kind of switched over to Methodist then. And I thought it was because of the job security. In the Methodists, they do these circuits, so one minister moves to another, and then you don't have to go out and canvass and find a church. And we stayed Methodists all the way through the rest of his career. After we were in New Hampshire, we moved to Idaho. We really wanted to get into Oregon, but Methodists had an Oregon-Idaho conference. To get into Oregon, you had to do your time in purgatory first. We had 2 churches in Idaho, Filer, which is near Twin Falls, and then Emmett, which is near Boise, but the middle of the desert, and wasn't a very nice place. As my memory, I'm sure a lot of people love the desert. Then we moved to Oregon, and my dad had 4 churches in Oregon. We moved about every 3 or 4 years. He served small churches, and really he spent a lot of time visiting, and the missions were a big part of his work. So he sent me this letter to read to you. I actually picked it up at his house. I wrote first to their house in McMinnville, which is my grandmother's house. She was involved with the Linfield College as a professor. Her husband was president of Linfield. That's my grandfather. So, dear friends of Fort Bragg Baptist Church, writes my father, greetings on the occasion of the 125th anniversary celebration. May the Lord bless this joyous event and strengthen your ministry to the Fort Bragg community. Among memories of our 3 years with you, I recall an afternoon visit to a shut-in couple. Amos Cruz was assisting. The husband said he had not received the elements in many years, but agreed to participate. And we shared the Lord's Supper. A few days later, he passed on in the hospital. The nurse reported that his final stay at the hospital, his former cantankerous attitude was replaced by a positive view. Whether communion or Amos Cruz's later visit helped, only the Lord knows, but surely his spirit was manifest there. On another occasion, according to church records, Patty Stenberg had refused to concur with other deacons who had voted to expel a church member because of reports of improprieties. I remember this. This is my desert. In a later entry, his caution was vindicated. The improprieties were unfounded gossip, and the person's membership was reinstated. The Girls' Guild, organized by my wife Jean, was a positive focus to the church's youth program. She also hosted and taught a midweek women's Bible study. As to our family, you all welcomed our second son, Stephen, born during our ministry here. Among the many saints in the church we would single out was the Butler family, who helped in our physical move from San Jose, and you mentioned Butlers too, and continued to be friends in many ways. We in the church were certainly strengthened by their presence. Yours in Christ, Elam J. Anderson. And while I've got the pulpit, I also want to mention, you know how preachers' kids are. A note of sadness. I started my trip in Corvallis 2 weeks ago, and just about a week afterwards, a friend of mine from Newport died of a heart attack. 24 years old, Zach Konovalchuk, was a fiddler who played Ukrainian music, busk on the Newport Bayfront, and he had had a heart attack a year before and went out jogging and then didn't come back. So I just want to ask for prayers for him and his family and hundreds of friends who have been really struck with grief. And just read a passage from Ecclesiastes, which has always touched me. Ecclesiastes 3. There is a time for everything, and a season for every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to uproot. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to tear down, and a time to build. A time to weep, and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to gather stones, and a time to scatter stones, and a time to gather them. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to search, and a time to give up. A time to keep, and a time to throw away. A time to tear, and a time to mend. A time to be silent, and a time to speak. A time for love, and a time to hate. A time for war, and a time for peace. And in memory of Zach, it's called me to the awareness that none of us know when we'll be called back to our Maker. I'm riding a bicycle on the highway. I understand that it's a high risk. They call it an extreme sport, but every moment we have could be our last moment here, and to just have that awareness and think, is there somebody that I need to tell them I love, or someone I need to forgive, or someone I need to apologize to that I haven't talked to? And this is the moment we have. So I ask you all to think about that. Our time is precious, and there's no time but now. So thank you all.